This is Kyle McCord, and you're listening to Austin, Felix, and Matt on the Devy Debate.
Welcome to the Devy Debate. All right, boys. Are we ready to debate? Austin, you tweeted something, girl. You tweeted your running back rankings. Explain yourself.
Boy, that escalated quickly. I mean, that really got out of hand fast. You jumped up and...
That's Austin Nace.
Who is going to be that guy? And for me, Bijan Robinson is still going to be that guy.
Back to the ground with Robinson, who spins and then tries to bounce it. A stiff arm, another one as he rides it, keeps his balance. They're going to say he stepped out, but
I'm Felix Sharp. I know you didn't think that we would get through this episode without mentioning the name one Zach F. Wilson.
Screener draw. Oh, Wilson is going to uncork for the end zone, and he drops it in beautifully. And it is his roommate Dax Milne on the touchdown.
That's Matt Bruning.
G. Scott Jr. Obviously, I waxed poetic about him on the last episode, so I won't do that again here.
And it's Donovan Fields on the carry. Watch out! Justin Fields. Hello, Columbus. 51 yards.
Bruning, are you ready to go head-to-head with me?
I am.
Got to get my popcorn out here. Hold on.
Got to continue. I got it. Kyle McCord is going to end up winning the job. He's going to be rated higher.
Well, I'm not nearly as passionate about what I'm about to talk about.
Our apologies to Herbstreit. We ran out of time. We'll get him rescheduled soon. And for Matt Bruning and Austin Nace, I'm Felix Sharp. Good night and good luck. It's 9:30 Eastern Time, the most American of time zones. That means it's time for the Devy Debate, brought to you by CampusToCanton.com. The whole crew is here tonight. Matt, Austin, and Chris, and myself. Of course, I'm Felix Sharp. On a Texas-sized version of tonight's show, Kyle McCord has been announced the starting quarterback again for some reason. And which players are we panicking on? But, Chris, I want to start with Shedeur Sanders. It's no question that he's playing exceptionally well, completing nearly 70% of his passes, 903 yards on the season, 10.1 per attempt, 6 touchdowns, and no interceptions. I think that's the most impressive number, especially considering the fact that they have had to pass the ball. They haven't really had a running game without Alton McCaskill there. Donovan Edwards, a smaller player, has been great in the passing game. They have not really been running the ball effectively. Anyway, regardless of how he's playing in college, Chris, the question now becomes, is he an NFL quarterback? Now, as a company, I think we generally took the stance, this guy with Sean Lewis there, he could be an asset for you CFF-wise. But if you're thinking of him as an NFL quarterback, we just don't see it that way. There are others out there, Ray, GQ being one of them, Adam and Mike, our friends over there at 4D Chess. They have really liked this guy. As your position or our position, Chris, should it change on Shedeur Sanders? Do you see him as an NFL quarterback?
Still no. So I really like Sean Lewis, and I think Sean Lewis maybe is not the type of guy to lead a program, but he is an excellent offensive mind, an excellent offensive coordinator, runs the veer and shoot system, which is basically an offshoot of, well, it's actually very similar to the Art Briles system, which, we saw that over the weekend. But Shedeur and Sean Lewis have like this mind meld right now where they are so in sync, and Shedeur is running this offense so well. But this is not an offense that translates to the NFL. I don't think that we have seen him make throws or plays where I say, wow, that's an NFL play. Maybe he's had one or two, but it's not that processing. It's not that high-end do-it-yourself pro scheme that I think we might want to see for a player who's being regarded as like a first-round pick in the NFL by some. So, no, my opinion has not changed. And what's funny is that a lot of people are saying, well, we saw him do this at Jackson State last year. We did not see anything like this at Jackson State for Shedeur Sanders. He now has a offensive coordinator who is one of the best in the business and is playing extremely well within it. He's awesome. Like, I don't want to take that away from him, but no, I have not seen enough to say that he's a legitimate NFL prospect.
Austin, when I clip this and put it on Twitter, the folks are going to come after us. What's the guy's name at CBS who came after Matthew last year? Anthony Richardson. I can't remember his name. Anyway, they're going to come after us.
Emory? I'm pretty sure his first name's Emory.
You're pretty sure, yeah. Austin, has your opinion changed on Shedeur Sanders at all?
I mean, I think a little bit, because I thought that he was probably like a mid-late round 3 guy coming into the year. I think that was a pretty fair range for him, and now I think he's probably closer to a second round guy. I partially agree with what Chris said, and I partially don't. He did have a couple of throws this past weekend. There was one specifically where he, I believe, was rolling to his left. I think it was early in the game, first quarter. It might have actually been the first drive, if you remember, Felix, where he rolled out and he threw this opposite hash throw to, I don't know if it was Travis Hunter or who it was, but it was
Travis
pretty
Hunter.
nice.
It was Travis
throw.
Hunter.
I know the throw, yeah.
Yeah, that was probably honestly the best throw I've seen from him this season. So I think he's looked a lot better. It's hard to say that because I mean, he was a 70% completion percentage guy at Jackson State on really low ADOT stuff. And we think we've seen, for the most part, similar usage. Where I do think the one concern that we did have that was huge that I think we should still have is that he's taken 11 sacks through 2 games. And not to say that he should have 1 or 2, but he definitely doesn't really offer anything in terms of sack avoidance. So really, I think even like high level play extension, we've seen a couple plays out of him where he's kind of scrambled and it's like, it's kind of more defensive ineptitude where I think more athletic defenders eat him up pretty easily. So I want to say, I think some of the things that we already knew that he could do, he's done at that level and actually a little bit better against better competition. I think that's good. I think some of the things that we thought were going to be issues for him are still going to be issues. Now, granted, if you protect him, if you put him behind a good offensive line, kind of honestly, like I think you kind of have to do for like a Tua, who I actually think is more mobile, but you kind of have to protect a guy like Tua. I think if you can kind of protect a guy like Shedeur, that he has a chance to be an NFL quarterback.
Can I respond to that real quick? Actually, because I disagree a little bit with the if you protect him. There were a lot of times where he was protected and held on for too long. Like that was a processing / just indecisiveness issue, and not necessarily a not mobile enough issue, which I do think is also a concern. But I thought he was slow.
See, I haven't seen the all-22 from the Nebraska game yet, and I turned it off about 3/4 of the way through because I could not stand to watch Jeff Sims anymore. Was legitimately making me mad as I was watching the game. But I need to see the all-22, but I thought basically Nebraska's game plan was that we only have to rush 3, maybe 4 on any given play because Colorado's offensive line is so inconsistent. There's some plays where they look great and some where they're just letting 3 guys through free. But their game plan was basically we can rush 4, we can drop 7, we have enough speed where we're not going to get beat over the top. We can keep them for the most part in front of us, which they did throughout the day. And so I do think there just weren't a lot of windows there for him to throw into. And I think as the game wore on, because they ran so many plays, that eventually those windows opened up a little bit because people were tired. But I do think that, and I think, again, as they see more teams, Colorado State's not going to be able to do it to them. But as they start seeing some of these teams that have back end speed and can get after the quarterback with 3 or 4 guys, I do think it's going to become an issue for them. And I'm interested to see if the other team can sustain drives, then their defense isn't going to be as tired. I'm interested to see what happens there.
We're talking about Quinn Ewers. or excuse me, we're talking about
No.
Shedeur Sanders and whether or
Shedeur
not
Sanders.
he's an NFL quarterback. I want to weigh in here just a second, Chris. So there was the throw. Yes, there was a throw early in the game, the out route to Travis Hunter. He was in really tight coverage and it was fit in there. And Shedeur Sanders kind of rolled out to that opposite hash throw. I think to be an NFL throw, you make that throw from the pocket. I mean, you make it a little bit easier by going to the side that you're actually going to throw to and throwing it there. Still accurate and what have you. You mentioned his sack avoidance or lack thereof. I thought that you were about to talk about the fact that he's not a rushing threat, which he isn't. And I don't have a problem with quarterbacks that aren't rushing threats. Michael Penix Jr., one of my favorites. Jake Haener, one of my favorites. Carson Strong, one of my favorites. Not rushing threats. But the thing that all of those guys had is they stepped up into the pocket and they could avoid edge pressure and they could extend plays. Just like you said, Austin, and I was going to hope that we said that, he does not extend plays particularly well. When I think about an NFL quarterback, there are, Tua Tagovailoa was like this guy who's kind of had everything except for the physique and everything. But as far as kind of pressing the issue downfield, he had that. I think Carson Strong had that. Somebody like Anthony Richardson, he walks into the room, you're like, well, that's a first-round NFL quarterback. I don't know what boxes Shedeur Sanders possesses outside of his ability to be consistent. That's a trait in and of itself, and he's been very consistent in finding the open player. But is he a guy that's going to make the opposite hash throw? Is he going to be a player who consistently hits passes 20 yards down the field? I don't know that he's even necessarily going to attempt those throws. He's not really being asked to in this offense. Every once in a while, yes, they will try to hit the deep shot, and he has been accurate on those throws. Some of those throws have even been dropped, and they've been accurate. I don't know that you can necessarily ask him to do that consistently. So when I think about a first-round quarterback, and that's what a franchise player is, what tools do they have to make them exceptional? Like, it's not enough just to be competent, and he has been beyond competent. Jason White, if you are old enough to remember Jason White at Oklahoma, that's what I mean, a guy that's going to take what the defense gives, who's going to be really good in that system. That's not it's not derogatory to say that he's not a first-round NFL draft pick. We think that he's operating well in the system. He is being given some layups, mostly layups, and he is making them. He's making the occasional jump shot, and once a game, he'll make the deep three or the three at the line. That's fine. That does not mean that you are an NFL quarterback, let alone like a franchise guy that you are going to build around. Chris Moxley, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I was just going to say, going back to the sack stuff, 8 of the 11 sacks that he's taken this year have been credited to him and not the offensive line per PFF, which feels accurate to me. I feel like he's spending too long processing, and like Felix just said, he just isn't mobile enough to extend plays. And it's funny, though, like Shedeur Sanders not being mobile enough feels super weird considering what the great athlete Dion was. I don't know. It's always struck me as weird that like he's not a crazy athlete considering
even
Deion
when he
like,
takes off, you're like, oh, please get down, please get on the ground. Because
he had a rushing touchdown this weekend, right?
He did.
Yes,
he did. But there was a scramble early in the game where I was just like, God, just get on the floor. Matthew, you wanted to add something here on Shedeur.
Yeah, so I think that we as a company were actually right on Shedeur Sanders, at least more with my write-up. And I think, Austin, you actually wrote him up for the freshman supplemental guide as well. We talked about how big of an equalizer Sean Lewis was going to be for him. And I think that's what a lot of people are overestimating right now is how good his stats have been against, if it's not unfair to say, 2 very bad defenses. When you go and look at his overall play, I think he has been fine. And I do think, I know Mike Valerie is going to kick back against this, but if you put the name factor into this, I do kind of agree with Austin. He's probably going to get second-round draft capital, but he's just a fine quarterback. I don't think he has an overly strong arm. He is not a rushing threat. I mean, you guys were just talking about his pocket manipulation. I think it's objectively horrible, if I'm being honest. He never steps up. Everything I saw in the TCU game was to the right and left.
Matthew, You're going to blame me when I put this on Twitter. You got to listen, and they're going to come after you, and you're going to send me a text message. Like,
no. I don't care. You can put it on Twitter. I don't care. I think that he is going to be a fine quarterback, and he is going to he's a game manager, but I still don't think he has anything that separates himself as any kind of like an elite quarterback. So if he makes it into the NFL, which I think he will be fine in the aspect of he'll win you games, but he's not a guy that is going to be putting up the fantasy points he's putting up for you right now in the NFL. I just don't think he has that talent to do it personally.
In other words, we're not trading for Shedeur Sanders anticipating that he will be a first-round NFL draft pick. I don't know. He's probably in the Hendon Hooker range of prospect, which is good.
I could see that healthy Hendon Hooker. Yeah, I think it's a guy that the name gets tossed around late first, but doesn't. Well, and I don't think it would have happened if Hooker was healthy.
Is he that much different than Will Rogers, Shedeur Sanders?
I haven't watched Will Rogers try to play this year yet, so I don't. I watched him previously, but
Will Rogers can't complete a pass beyond 50 yards, but it's not like Shedeur has some rocket arm, and they're asked to do very similar things within their system. So I don't know. I'm not there on the round 2 stuff, and maybe he goes round 3, but I don't know.
Mike's in the chat, and he says he's going to go round 3. Brad says analytically, college QB 3. It's been 2 weeks. Caleb 1, Penix 2, sniff. Yep, it passes the sniff test. I don't know if he's saying that about Shedeur, that Shedeur passes the sniff test. Maybe he is. Let's move on here. I guess we're going to talk about quarterbacks here to start. Matthew, Quinn Ewers, 24 for 38, 349 yards, 63.2 yards per attempt, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions at Alabama in Tuscaloosa. He was also 3 for 5 on passes that traveled more than 20 yards. I don't know. Do you think you deserve a victory lap on Quinn Ewers here, that he hit guys that had 7 yards of separation? And Chris is nodding his head like, yes, Matt deserves a victory lap. Okay.
No, not yet. We'll take the victory lap at the end of the year when I end up being right and he's a first-round pick. I'm not going to take a victory lap right now. It was a good game. Really, I kind of want him to play Alabama every week, if I'm being honest, because, damn, he played really good last year and again this year. It is by far one of his better games. But I don't think it's unfair. I know you guys talked a little bit about it last week. He's still really struggling to throw the deep ball, and I don't want anybody to not take that away from some of the passes he had in that Alabama game. It's been bad. Go ahead.
He missed Xavier, and Matthew, I think you have a little bit of delay there. He missed Xavier Worthy.
I did. Yeah.
Xavier Worthy split the defense on an early throw, and it was the first quarter. I was getting ready to flame him, but I think he came back, and it might have been that same drive where he had that the touchdown pass on the opposite side of the field to Xavier Worthy. I will say this though, I have breaking news. I have seen an impressive Quinn Ewers throw. And it wasn't either of the throws to none of the throws to Xavier Worthy. It was the back shoulder-ish deep throw to Adonai Mitchell along the left sideline. They were in man with a safety over the top, and he put it right on Adonai Mitchell's back shoulder behind the corner and away from the safety. Quinn Ewers, I've finally seen an impressive throw from you. Congratulations, buddy. Go ahead, Chris.
I almost texted you that throw, too, and said that exact same thing. That was basically, hey, have you seen something impressive yet? Because, that throw is really, really – I actually thought he had
that was the best throw of the game. The touchdown passes, those guys were open. Adonai Mitchell was not open on that throw, and he put it in the perfect spot.
Yeah, so I thought he had a really good game, but I didn't think that he had a spectacular win you the week game. I just thought Alabama's defense kind of played like crap. But still, you have to be a little bit excited about what Quinn showed against Alabama. He's the Alabama killer. He would have killed Alabama last year. He would kill Alabama this year. He just elevates himself through this game, man. I don't know what it is. I hope that he can get that deep stuff under control, though, because like Matt said, it's still an issue. And it was an issue all of last year. It's still an issue now. I mean, Xavier Worthy was still dropping passes, too, and he doesn't even have the broken hand to rely on this time. But I don't know, man. I just need him to clean that up because he's so good in other areas of the field.
Yeah. My biggest fear with that is we've seen him last year specifically in games that they should easily win play like dog shit. And they don't have anybody really on that schedule that I am at all worried about. And I'm worried he goes back to Rice Quinn Ewers that we saw last week. I need him to stay Alabama Quinn Ewers the rest of the season.
The funny thing is on the touchdown pass to Mitchell. First of all, both of these the one to Mitchell, the one to Xavier Worthy, there's like no safeties anywhere because they don't respect Quinn Ewers' ability to hit you. So eventually he's going to have to throw these balls into coverage, especially at the NFL level. I'm not giving you a whole bunch of credit throwing to receivers with 5 and 7 yards of separation. If you would have hit that pass where Xavier Worthy split the double team and had like 2 yards, I'd have gave him a standing ovation for that one. So, Austin, any takeaways from Ewers? Do you have faith in him now? Go trade for Quinn Ewers now, right?
This is a sell window, right? I think this is the window that if you had him and you wanted to get rid of him, you've been waiting for. Hasn't opened for Kyle McCord yet, but maybe someday. Maybe someday.
2 more weeks.
Praise,
2 more weeks.
Oh, God.
Wait.
Kyle McCord just taking strays over here. Promo code C2C for Prize Picks, $100 match. Use promo code Prize Picks and promo code Campus to Canton at Home Field Apparel. Get all of your college football apparel. I think Matthew has on a Texas shirt from Home Field Apparel right there. Use promo code Campus, the number 2 Canton, all one word, for 15% off. And it helps us grow. Let's talk about the aforementioned Kyle McCord, Matthew. In the weirdest announcement that I've heard this season, he had already been announced the starting quarterback, and Ryan Day announces him as the starting quarterback a second time after giving Devin Brown, 4 passes against Youngstown State. Kyle McCord has been announced as the full-time starter.
I mean, I'm not going to take a victory lap here either, but all that Devin Brown bluster you had going on for the past 2 weeks really kind of died with a whimper there. I mean, I don't really know what to say. I mean, clearly he wasn't good enough if he's only getting 4 passes a game in practice. But, I mean, look, Kyle McCord hasn't been good either. I think the big test is going to be that Notre Dame game. I said that earlier in spring. I thought that honestly it would go into the season. I'm actually surprised that Day already announced McCord the starter. I thought they would at least go into week 3 and then they would decide who's going to be the starting quarterback for the Notre Dame game. It's a massive game for them to go into Notre Dame and try and win that. I mentioned this, I think, after the, or maybe it was during the Indiana game. You go back to 2 years ago, C.J. Stroud's first game against Minnesota. He did not play well at all, and Ryan Day was extremely conservative. And I think we have seen that in these first 2 games, even when, again, Devin Brown went out there. They didn't let Devin Brown throw until the 4th quarter. His first time out there, he handed the ball off, I believe. Like, people, don't get me wrong, Ryan Day can be a very aggressive play caller when he wants to be, but he isn't if he doesn't trust you. So I personally am not taking that much away. I don't disagree with you. He is. I'm not taking that much away from what Kyle McCord has done in these 2 games. It's going to be that Notre Dame game where we're going to see what Kyle McCord really is, because that could be, it's going to be a close contest if Sam Hartman and that offense continues playing that way. So Kyle McCord's going to have to make those throws to keep Ohio State in the game. That's the game we're going to find out who Kyle McCord really is. You can't take anything away from these past couple games. And this, maybe Western Kentucky puts up a fight. I don't think that they really will. So I don't think we're going to see much this week either.
Austin, we can talk about the implications for later in the season, when they play Notre Dame. But for right now, I think about what's the domino effect here. We've got Devin Brown as the backup. You got Aaron Nolan coming in. They've got Lincoln Kineholtz there. It's kind of a crowded quarterback room. Kyle McCord does not strike me as he's having the type of season where we would expect him to make the jump next year. So I think we have to project that as much as, Devin Brown's going to stick around and play it there at Ohio State, somebody's going to leave this room, because the picture doesn't change next year. Like nobody's making the jump to the NFL. So what do you think about this quarterback room overall and what happens there after this season?
Man, I don't feel comfortable like actually giving like a hard prediction. I think at least one player probably has to leave, right? I mean, I don't think you can keep all four of those guys there. I think we've said that before, and then the guys stay, but I do think it would be a pretty big mistake on those players to hang around for years without any sort of open door or cracked door to getting that starting job. I could see Keinhold's leaving. He's from a more West Coast guy. Could see him heading to, a school out there. I could see Devin Brown leaving. I could see him going to BYU or something next year because I think this is Slovis's last year. I could see either of those guys leaving. I don't think it's going to be Aaron Nolan decommitting. I think he's going to be there no matter what. But yeah, I mean, what is? I don't think McCord was going to go pro. I mean, his dad. I don't know if his dad ever went to the NFL or not, but he played college football. Like he knows. They talk to people regularly. They're going to know that he's not considered that level of player. So, I mean, I think that this just gums up the works even more there. I'm glad I didn't really draft any Lincoln Keinholds this offseason expecting there to be some sort of clear succession plan because I don't think there is one right now.
I think it's going to be Brown, personally. And that's what I said.
He should. I mean, he should, yeah.
If Kyle doesn't leave, we'll just go right back to what Moxley said not even 5 minutes ago. Day's a coward. He's not going to push McCord out the door, especially if Ohio State makes it into the playoffs, which realistically all they have to do is beat Michigan because I do think they'll beat Notre Dame.
And Notre Dame.
I think that they will.
And Penn State.
Of how good Penn State's a good one. I'll give you Penn State. I think the defense for Ohio State is at least so far looked much more improved than it was last year. So Penn State, Michigan, if McCord's able to get through those two and get Ohio State to the playoffs, he's not telling McCord, hey, it was nice to have you for a year and go. He's going to bring him back, which means Devin's going. There's no way Devin stays. I wouldn't be surprised if Keinhold stays because I could see Day doing the whole, well, it'll be your shot next, like he's done with Devin for the past 2 years. And Keinhold stays at least for a year to compete with Aaron Nolan. I agree with Austin. Nolan's not going anywhere, but I think it's almost assured that Devin Brown's gone after this year would be my guess.
Chris, we talked about a sell window opening for Quinn Ewers. It's a buy window for Devin Brown. Austin shaking his head no. What do you say?
I don't know. His future is so murky that it's not really something I want to invest in is essentially my stance on it. Like there are better bets to make at this point. I don't know how to feel about it, but I mean, I was so unimpressed with Ohio State through 2 games. Like you can't score 35 points against a team whose mascot is the Penguins straight up. Just like you can't do that. I mean, the Lions are some sort of like strong mammal. We're talking different, but team against you can't score 35 against the Penguins. And I didn't think they looked particularly good against Youngstown State either. And I mean, McCord was okay, but yeah, I just
that long touchdown to Marvin Harrison. I mean, it was absolutely a broken coverage.
It was wider open than the Quinn Ewers throws.
Yes.
It was. Gosh, this situation is such a mess because I think Devin Brown should have transferred out this offseason and didn't, with Ryan Day probably being like, oh, it's a battle, knowing 100% of the time that he was going to pick Cotton McCord because he's been in the system longer.
I mean,
I don't know how the rules work, but I wonder if he could hypothetically, if he entered the transfer portal now, if he preserves a year of eligibility. And Matthew, it looks like you were getting
before the 4th game. As long as he does it before the 4th game, he can enter. If he enters the transfer portal, he technically redshirts this year.
I don't believe you can enter the portal right now.
You can't enter it, but you can state that someone did that.
I mean, he's just going to tell. Yeah, Dallin Holker.
Yeah.
Well, like Gary Bryant did that too.
They can just say
telling the coach you're not going to play.
Yeah,
which
I'm not playing anymore.
Honestly,
and you're entering. If you're buying Devin Brown, like I know this is the easy answer. You're like hoping he goes to like Washington. Like outside of that, I don't know where he goes that you feel great about him next year because he hasn't shown.
He looks getting hot and heavy.
What do you
Kendall Bryles with?
I would. I absolutely would. Yeah. and I have both Austin Mack. So pretty
because
much
if he goes, like, let's say what Austin said earlier, if he goes to BYU, I don't know that he's going to become a fantasy asset there. Because I don't know that he brings you that much rushing upside. And I don't know that he's going to be Zach Wilson 2.0 and go out to BYU and have a great year and then get drafted in the first round.
He could do it. I mean, he can do it at Baylor with Jeff Collins there.
Maybe. I'm just saying, like,
Jeff Collins got lucky one year and Felix just loves this dude.
Yeah, no.
It's the system that he runs, which has been effective in a lot of places. The wide zone. That's what they run at North Dakota State. That's why Trey Lance had the season that he had. They run the wide zone play action off that. Lots of deep shots. I mean, it's a great system. That's what Jeff Collins runs. If he can get a running back and a quarterback, it would be decent. So, I mean, they got the speed at wide receiver. Monterey Baldwin is one of the fastest players in the country. Okay. Anything else on Kyle McCord, Ohio State? Can we move on? So the Saturday morning shows are doing really well. We appreciate your support of those. They're actually doing really well compared to what we've done in seasons past. I mean, we're getting 3 or 4 times the viewership that we had in season past. We want to get to 2,000 subscribers on YouTube before the season's over. So go ahead and subscribe to the YouTube page, Campus to Canton. James adds in the chat that he would love to see Devin Brown at Kentucky next year. I mean, you got Devin Brown and Dane Key. They got one more year before they become draft eligible. I think.
Barian Brown.
I said Brown. I said.
Brown. I thought you meant Devin Brown when you said Brown.
Barian Brown. Yeah, Brown to Brown. It would be a good. I think that would be a good spot. I think there are a lot of good spots for Devin Brown. I'm not moving him in my rankings. I don't care what you say. I don't care what any of you all say. I'm keeping him at 5 or 6 or wherever it is that I have.
Egregious.
Let's get to the panic meter here. There are some players that are underperforming, and I want to have a sense for how concerned we should be. From 10 being hair on fire to 1 being it's cool. Let's start with TreVeyon Henderson. Chris. TreVeyon Henderson basically shared touches in week 1 with everybody in Ohio State's backfield. Week 2, he did fine, but every time I see TreVeyon Henderson highlight, he is running through a gaping open hole and is using his speed to get there. But he did score. He scored twice this last week. I think he had over 100 yards. Are you panicking on TreVeyon Henderson?
So I was already kind of low on him. So personally, I don't think I am panicking, but I think the community should, because he was being elevated as a top 3-ish back. And I don't really like the early returns. I didn't like the early returns last year either. I just don't think that he's reached the highs of his freshman season that we saw. And I don't think he's really been the player that from his high school tape either. I mean, this was a guy who was compared to Christian McCaffrey. And you're looking at a player like I've called him soft many times. And I just don't think he has that physicality that you want. Like, yeah, he can run through open holes. And yeah, he doesn't have the worst vision in the world. But I mean, I am becoming extremely skeptical on what his Devy upside is. So yeah, the panic meter should be like 7 or 8 for Devy community. Like, I don't know. I just am not in on TreVeyon Henderson at this point.
Matthew?
I would say a 6 or 7. I mean, I still think he's going to end up being fine the way that they keep talking about him, the wanting to get him more and more involved. Ryan Day talked about him today in his press conference, wanting to get him the ball more in the passing game. Again, I just talked earlier, this offense has not been clicking. Like, I think the more we get into the season, the fact that he was getting the ball as early as he was in that game against Indiana and even some of the carries against Youngstown State, as long as he stays healthy, I agree with Mox. I don't think he's going to return to the value we had of him as a freshman, but I think putting it as like an 8, 9, or 10 is just overreacting. Ohio State's offense has not looked good. And it's still going to be one of the better.
It's not about Ohio State's offense, though. It's about the individual traits that we're seeing from this player and whether or not we think he can be that dude for an NFL team. There was at one point where we thought he could be a first-round draft pick at the running back position. I don't even know that I would lock him into the second round now, to be honest with you.
I would disagree with both of the things you just said there. I don't care if he's not going to be that dude because we've propped up players who have gotten draft capital that we've said are not going to be those dudes. And we say that, well, that matters because they get the draft capital. So now they have trade value. He's still going to go in the second round. He's not going in the first round. There's no way. I will agree with you on that. But he's still going to go in the second round because this is a weak running back class. He will still get drafted in the second round. If you don't believe he's going to be that dude, then move him. At that point, you still will have value and have the chance to move him if he gets second.
But what are you saying though? You're saying about how they're going to use him in the offense, etc.
Yeah, I think he's going to have.
Do you think he has the elite traits to be an asset and fantasy wise at the NFL level when he declares for the NFL draft?
Yeah, I don't think he's going to be an RB1 if that's what you're asking. He's probably more of like an RB 15 to 20 for fantasy purposes. But I think he's going to be able to score you points because he is a receiving back. He has the home run ability. Is he Christian McCaffrey like people thought? No, he's not. Clearly, we've learned that. But I still think he's got the ability to be a very good running back. I think his death or his demise is being widely overstated. He was not healthy at all last year. It's 2 games in. Last week, you guys were saying Quinn Ewers was a bum. This week, now he's back to like a first-round quarterback. Guys, it's 2 weeks. Like
we have not said that. We have not said that.
Someone
and it's been 2 years for TreVeyon Henderson. Including him slipping and falling against Penn State all over the place.
Year one, as Chris Moxley said, we were propping him up because of how great of a freshman season. To not have played football for an entire year and had the freshman season he had was a really damn good year. Last year, he was injured from week 1 on. I'm not judging him that much. Now, granted, yes, it's not been a great 2 weeks, but it's 2 weeks in. Like, let's kind of give him a little bit of time before we just say, dude's not even going to be a second-round pick.
And, of course, Matthew has a completely objective take on this whole thing.
100%.
Austin, what's your take on TreVeyon Henderson?
Yeah, I'm probably around a 7. I think the biggest issue for him is that they just refuse to use him in the receiving game. And I'm not exactly sure. Like, even if we don't think he's a above average runner, there's no reason why this guy shouldn't be getting 35, 40 targets in a season. Like, just straight up. If you look at his numbers, he got 29 targets as a freshman, 6 last year, and 3 through 2 games this year. If you're running a more conservative offense this year, you would think he'd be getting twice those targets. I don't think that they've done a good job of using him how he should be used. And I do think that is hurting him. And I think it's going to hurt him a little bit in the eyes of scouts over the next couple of years. I mean, there's no reason for the usage. And if you look at like his receiving yards per team pass attempt, I'm not saying he is as polished or as good of a receiver as Jahmyr Gibbs was. But if you go look at their numbers, like they should be a lot closer in terms of receiving yards per team pass attempt and things like that. And they're not even in the same ballpark. And I blame coaching staff for a lot of that.
I think I'm putting it at. Listen, I've been trying to like be very, very. First of all, Matt Waldman had a 25-minute discussion on TreVeyon Henderson 2 weeks ago. If you're an NIL subscriber, I would encourage you to go listen to that because he speaks in detail some of the themes that we're talking about now. I have been like hoping that the people that I'm playing with aren't like listening to what it is that we're doing because TreVeyon Henderson is still a name. And I have been trying to trade him to move like quote unquote down. For example, I tried to get Donovan Edwards in a piece for TreVeyon Henderson. And I feel like word is getting out there that
I don't think that's a super smart trade either, if that's your intention. But
well, you don't?
They're the same player.
I think he's on our
They're not the same player.
The same player.
Go ahead, Chris. What? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Flame me for trying. Go ahead.
I mean, there's a reason why he's on our show sheet panic meter list as well as TreVeyon. I mean, Donovan Edwards has some big questions too.
Okay. I think I've seen more from Donovan Edwards as a pure running back in that Ohio State game. And, after Blake Corum tore his ACL, I think I saw more from him as a pure running back than I have from TreVeyon Henderson to this point. Yes, they are similar players, but I said I like adding a piece.
Is he not just running through wide open holes as well?
No, I don't think so. Not against Ohio State where they had everybody at the line of scrimmage. What are you talking about, Matthew? You sitting here. They had like they had 13 people
on his game breaking play. Yes, he did the Red Sea parted and he made one player miss and took it 60 yards in the house. What do you mean there wasn't a massive hole? I think you're misremembering because you're a Michigan
Okay.
fan. There was a gaping.
Oh.
I could have run at
Ooh.
least 30 yards before I got taken
okay.
down with that.
The pot, man, if you talk about the pot calling the kettle black over here.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on here to Donovan, the aforementioned Donovan Edwards. Chris Moxley, where are you at on the panic meter for Michigan's dynamic number 2 back there in Ann Arbor?
Yeah, he's been pretty terrible to start the year. Just has not been up to his usually pretty efficient self. I'm probably at a 5-ish. I'm not super worried, but it's not super encouraging either because he is a smaller back. He needs to play a certain role in the NFL. And I don't really doubt his talent as a receiver, but I kind of doubt if he has that upside to be a true, 15 touch back. Like is he Alvin Kamara? I am leaning, Alvin Kamara's special, but like that the archetype, right? I'm starting to lean no. Whereas if you asked me like 3 months ago, I probably would have said yes. So I think he's going to be a good passing down back regardless in the NFL. I don't know what his rushing upside is because I haven't seen him. And I'm not sure I've ever really seen him be a really good and efficient rusher. And he's still not putting it together. So, yeah, I think he's a guy who goes in the second round, but a lot of that's going to be based on his receiving ability.
He has more proven receiving ability than TreVeyon Henderson in my
He does.
opinion. Yeah. Austin, where are you at on panic meter for Donovan Edwards?
There was a reason that I don't want to speak for all of us that a lot of us have had him, right on the cusp of top 10, even with the mass exodus of running backs this year, because we needed to see more rushing upside. This is why these guys are really attractive to draft after year 1, but not so attractive to draft after year 2, because you're just shortening the time that we get to see some of these things happen and develop. So I'm not panicking because I think he's just kind of stagnated. We were hopeful, but I'm not writing him off, but I'm a little less hopeful than I was a few weeks ago. Yeah.
I'd probably agree with Chris and say right around a 7. I wanted to see more of him as a rusher. Receiving wise, I agree with what Felix said. Like, he's better than TreVeyon in every asset of that, but I don't think an NFL team is going to draft him solely for that purpose. And he's not even had a season rushing wise that Henderson had as a freshman. And if he's not able to, who'd they play? East Carolina and UNLV? And he's not even gotten to 50 yards rushing yet. I just don't know that he's going to be able to turn around, especially the fact that Blake Corum came back and he's getting as many carries as he has. I still think he goes day 2, but I think him not being efficient on the ground is going to hurt his ability. If we're talking from a C2C perspective, like, you're losing out on a guy you thought was going to be scoring you a ton of points every single week. He's not even giving you that now.
He'll end up a better prospect than James Cook, right?
Yeah, I think so.
So, that's probably the archetype of player that's being drafted in the NFL. I think he's probably pretty close to that. And I don't think that's a bad bet considering he's a day 2 or round 2 RB, but still, I think you're a little disappointed regardless based on
I think we're getting I think we're seeing some recency bias playing in here. We keep comparing Donovan Edwards to TreVeyon Henderson. They've been actually, especially from a lot of analytical items, fairly comparable over their couple of years. And of their 3 years in school so far, TreVeyon's actually been the superior runner twice. So I think this is TreVeyon was so good year 1 and then has been lackluster since that we're downgrading him maybe more than we should. And because Donovan Edwards has been like kind of the same, we're not hitting him as hard as we should here. Just my 2 cents. I don't think they're really I wouldn't put Donovan Edwards ahead of him right now. I wouldn't. Not saying same tier, sure, same tier, but I don't think that there's any real difference there.
I think I've seen more.
Same tier is different than where the consensus of the community has them, though. Like, I don't think if you asked that a lot of people would have TreVeyon and Donovan Edwards in the same tier, but I agree that they are the same tier.
Also, I will say Brad just put this question about hypothetically, isn't 4 years in college with NIL more valuable than going pro early? if someone can show me an NIL deal that a running back's actually getting that's worth more than the NFL contract they would have gotten, there, to my knowledge, there is not one. Blake Corum did not get more money this year than he would have gotten in the NFL.
No.
I think
that doesn't exist. It doesn't happen.
It only comes in for guys who are going to be drafted in the 5th, 6th, 7th round. That's
even those guys aren't getting that kind of cash because they're 5th, 6th, 7th round backs. Like they're just not that good. They're replaceable.
They may come back thinking they can increase their draft capital. If you know you're going day 2, you're not coming back for any kind of NIL deal, especially not at the running back position.
Some G5 quarterbacks and high-end position players are getting enough to avoid going to the draft to being drafted like round 7 or UDFA. I believe that because I think Frank Harris is one of those players.
I'm a 0 on the panic meter for Donovan Edwards. I think in the limited time that we've seen him be the primary back, I think we've seen more physicality from his game than we've seen in 3 years from TreVeyon Henderson. And I think that Donovan Edwards has the edge as far as being a pass catcher. And if you're telling me he's James Cook with more size, more ability to run in the middle of the offense, in the interior running game, I think that that's a very valuable NFL asset. So no panic on. And then next year he should be the guy to himself. He should have the backfield to himself.
Would you draft Edwards over TreVeyon right now?
The thing is I just wouldn't draft TreVeyon. Like we've done startups, and I just haven't drafted TreVeyon, and I've taken Donovan Edwards
I haven't either.
in the 2nd round, including in League of Record. I've taken Donovan Edwards in the 2nd round. So I'm just not taking TreVeyon at the end of the 1st. Like I would rather have Darian Brown. I'd rather have
cost was tough on both of those guys this offseason, I think.
Yeah. Tougher question. Would you trade if someone offered you TreVeyon for Donovan Edwards? Would you make that trade?
I think if I can get more than Donovan Edwards. I think that TreVeyon has this name, and he has a 1,300-yard freshman season. He has the 5-star pedigree. I might be able to get Donovan Edwards and one of these freshman wide receivers that I want. Maybe Jonte Cook. Jonte Cook hasn't gotten off to a great start. I might be able to make a trade like
that. So you're the Donovan Edwards owner. Someone offers you TreVeyon in a swap, straight up.
No.
Okay, no. So that's the answer. You value Donovan Edwards more than TreVeyon.
I would. Correct. Who put Malik Nabers on the list? Malik Nabers has had 5 catches for 87 yards and 6 for 67. I mean, that's pretty good considering he's playing with Jaden Daniels.
Jaden Daniels, yeah.
Jaden Daniels
hasn't even been the top guy on their team.
I put him on the list, and I have been very unimpressed so far with Malik Nabers, despite the okay stats.
You've been unimpressed in his entire.
I am a certified Malik Nabers hater, apparently, because I just don't think he's that good of a wide receiver. I honestly don't think he's been like anything special this season. Like he's been fine, but I've watched both LSU games, and I have not come away being like, oh, this is a dude who needs to be drafted in the top like 60 picks. Like, yeah, he'll probably go round 2, but he's certainly not a first rounder in my estimation. And I'd be surprised if he ended up there come NFL draft time. I just don't see it.
I had not watched LSU. I guess I watched the Florida State game, but I didn't watch them last week. But Brian Thomas is actually leading the team in receiving, 13 receptions, 220 yards, 16.9 per, and 3 touchdowns. I remember I took Brian Thomas in the 1st round of a freshman draft that we did like 3 years ago now, and was mocked and ridiculed. Now, I probably should have been mocked and ridiculed, but he's still leading receiver.
He's really changed his game this year. It's really interesting. Where
you know who he reminded me of coming out of high school? He reminded me of, and they wore the same colors. He reminded me of Preston Williams at Colorado State and then Miami. He reminded me of Preston Williams.
Could see that, yeah.
But I mean, we were talking about Brian Thomas in the Discord or the Slack earlier. Like Austin, you were saying you were really impressed.
He just is way more athletic than I remember him being in terms of like not. I basically viewed him as Dane Key the past couple of years, like kind of that springy vertical guy that basically does one thing, and it's kind of get downfield and win that way. But he took a long touchdown to the house against FSU. Like I didn't even think he had any wiggle in his game at all. That really, really interested me. He almost looked more like I don't want to make this direct comp, but who's the LSU kid that got taken by the Carolina Panthers 2 years ago or 3 years
Terrace
ago?
Marshall.
Terrace Marshall.
Yes, he kind of looked like Terrace Marshall with like the burst that he showed, which did not think that he possessed. So I thought that was really, really interesting. I mean, for the record, no, I actually don't think he is a year 1-0. I think all the LSU receivers passed year 1-0 their first year, right?
I believe you are correct. And I mean, he's a guy who's 6'4", like 205, 210. Like that, he's a nice size adjusted guy, but I agree on that burst thing. Like the way he caught the pass and then like kind of turned upfield, he kind of separated pretty quick. And I didn't think that he had that in him either.
Well, we're talking about Nabers here, Austin. Where are you on the panic meter on Malik Nabers?
I don't know, 5. It's another guy that I just think he kind of is what we thought he was coming into the year. I think his big problem is he just doesn't have like a discernible difference-making skill right now. Like I don't think he's a great separator. I don't think he's great after the catch. I don't know that he's shifty enough to play in the slot, but I don't know that he's physical enough to play on the boundary. Like I think he's just a lot of things that like really make me question what his role in the NFL is. Like it's just some of those guys that come out that they just don't like, they're fine football players, but it's just like, pick this guy out and put him in the NFL. And what does he do that's at that level? I'm not sure that he has that. I will say he's pretty good at the catch point. He's almost Tylan Wallace 2.0, but I think he's
is.
He's never been used quite downfield that way. So I don't want to like necessarily pigeonhole him into that, but there's issues there.
Tylan Wallace, Mike Gundy always has a 5'10" contested catcher. And Malik Nabers has his fans out there. So if one of Malik Nabers fans wants to come up here and tout Malik Nabers and why he should be a coveted C2C asset, send us a DM. You are more than welcome on. Matthew, where are you at on the panic meter on Malik Nabers?
I'd say probably a 5 or 6 as well. I don't think I agree with everything Austin said. I think the big thing that's going to, he's going to retain value because this wide receiver class is just so bad. He's going to get decent draft capital because he's just going to be a guy there. But I'm not really intrigued at all with how – I don't think he played horrible against Florida State, but, I mean, against Grambling State for what Jaden Daniels, I think, threw 5 touchdowns and 3 of them went to running backs. Like, I just don't think he's going to produce enough for you on your C2C side this year to really be a guy you're starting every single week. So then you're just counting and hoping that he ends up getting decent draft capital. Again, you're able to move him when he goes to the NFL. I agree with Austin. I don't know that he has a discernible trait to be this NFL guy you're counting on for your NFL roster. So
if we're talking kind of some of those wide receivers that we said like are iffy in terms of their placement on day 2, I wouldn't take him over Keon Coleman at this point. I wouldn't take him over Jalen McMillan at this point because I know what McMillan's role is in the NFL. Agreed. I wouldn't take him over Troy Franklin, and I don't even love Troy Franklin. But at least he's got a skill that I think could get him there.
Mike Valerie is shitting himself that you just said that you're taking Troy Franklin.
I would probably take, in terms of like projecting to the pros, I would probably take he switched his name like 4 times. Yeah, I would take Adonai Mitchell. I would take Adonai Mitchell over Malik Nabers at this point.
Wow. That's aggressive, but I don't.
Because
I don't
at least I look at Adonai Mitchell and I say this guy can probably, even if he's not like a true X, I think he can play on the boundary as kind of a guy that at worst is like red zone possession, a 4 for 48 and a touchdown every other game kind of guy. I'm not sure that Nabers fills kind of one of those roles that I think Mitchell could.
That still makes him. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Chris.
No, I was just gonna say I hate projecting guys to the NFL that succeed in college in a way that is very counterintuitive. Yeah. And Malik Nabers is that guy. I felt Marvin Mims was that guy at Oklahoma as well. I James Washington is like the OG, like you're a slow like field stretcher. Like you're not going to succeed in the NFL. So I
Madden always has those players that'll be rated like as a rookie, they'll be rated 85. It'll be a wide receiver with like 78 speed. And you're like, what can I do with this player? I can't do anything with this player.
So he fits in that bucket of like, yeah, he's a contested catch receiver, but like that's really weird for his profile and probably not one that's going to succeed at the NFL level. I don't know. I've been low on him, and I have not really moved off of that. But sorry, Matt, I interrupted you.
No, you're good. I was just gonna say that still makes him, with all the guys Austin named, if you put Xavier Worthy, Rome Odunze, Marvin Harrison, and Mecca, who are the ones obviously I think everybody's taking over, it still makes him a top 8 wide receiver in the class. Like that's just that's what you're holding on to. You're hoping that he gets that day 2 draft capital, and then you can just move him and hope Mike Valerie's in your league, because you'll get a high-end wide receiver and probably a good freshman like Felix is trying to do for Malik Nabers.
We mentioned him earlier in the show. Should Kyle McCord be on this list as far as being a panic meter? Austin's shaking his head yes. So where would you what's your number?
Pretty high, an 8 and 9. I think the problem is that you can't really sell him for anything. Like, I think he's pretty firmly a hold. You're either hoping that he turns it around or that he has to toe that very fine line where he's bad enough that they don't take him back next year, but he transfers somewhere that's a little more of a step down and he looks really good. I mean, that's kind of what your hopes are for this point. I think I can't really see him being selected in the first round of the NFL. Like, I just don't think. I think he breaks the string of Ohio State QBs.
Chris?
I was so unimpressed with how he looked against Indiana, man. I just can't get that performance out of my head. And I know it was week 1, but
it's been 3 performances now because we're going back to the spring game.
He played. Yeah. I know, absolutely. I'm at an 8 or 9 as well. I'm essentially out at this point.
All right, let me take a vote here. Should I even ask Matthew where he's at on this?
Absolutely.
On this thing?
It's a 10.
No, because I think.
What are you worried about?
So I think he's going to give us
it's an
aggressive
8.
number.
It's an 8 because you were with him taking over that offense. It's what we talked about. You wanted the quarterback for Ohio State because of the points that they have put up. He's not even giving you that against probably the 2 worst teams they're going to play this entire season. So yeah, you have to be worried about it because again, if he doesn't bounce back in any discernible way when he's just okay, you're not getting the points from him, probably not from a overall C2C value, but it tanks Marvin Harrison, it tanks Mecca, who are 2 guys you were counting on as well. So yeah, you have to be worried. It's got to be at least an 8.
All right.
Somebody in the comments, as we were talking about this wide receiver class, asked about Xavier Weaver. I haven't seen enough. I haven't watched enough of him purely this year to have an opinion. I'm still buying him as if he's a CFF guy.
I thought he's looked pretty good, actually.
Could see a path to more. I mean,
he's got nice separation, and he's kind of.
You'll be able to see him pretty much every week on national television, so don't worry. You'll be able to see enough of him. I offered last week anyone who left a 5-star rate and review would be eligible to get a month free at campuscan.com. And J Mike, the icon in this industry, is the only person who left a review. Let me see if I can find it.
A guy who I've had conversations with over the internet like this, face to face, and didn't even recognize me at the expo. J Mike, if you're listening, hurt my feelings.
J Mike's the man.
Oh,
we're not going to ask the other panic meter guy, by the way, Felix.
Oh, who is it?
It's got to be an 8 too. It's Carson Beck.
Carson Beck. You know what? His first year as a starter, that offense is getting on its horse. I'm a 0 on the panic meter on Carson Beck. But let me read this 5-star review.
Let me please confirm my priors real quick.
And then,
yeah.
And then I will toss it. I will toss it to Austin. I'll tell you what this about Carson Beck. I don't like the nonsense that was going on social media with him in the offseason. I don't like my quarterbacks to be involved in that kind of stuff. Allegedly. Okay, this is from J Mike. Rocked with Devy debate for a couple of years now. Thoroughly enjoy the insight they provide into the game and the game within the game of fantasy. They're bold when they're sharing their perspective, which is always founded in heavy research and a myriad of experience. Cheers to the dope group and terrific endeavor. That's from J Mike. Very, very nice from the deep voiced man himself. Chris Moxley, panic meter on Carson Beck.
I'll be honest with you. I haven't watched a lot of UGA football, but just looking at the, box score scouting and looking at some of the PFF metrics, I think there's a little bit of reason to be concerned. I mean, you had the
They haven't had
tax
Ladd
auditor
McConkey. They have not had Ladd McConkey in 2 weeks.
Oh, yeah, because
There's no
Ladd
reason to be.
Ladd McConkey is
That's
going
right.
to move the needle against UT Martin in such a substantial way.
That's right.
Yeah, I don't know.
That's right.
It's a
You're
six.
damn right. They need Ladd McConkey. He's the stir that he's the straw that stirs the drink.
Austin's going to say 0 because he didn't matter to begin with. Is that what you're
Correct. There shouldn't have been expectations.
I knew it.
0.
I mean, honestly, I'm with Austin. I was going to say a 1 or 2. Why I didn't have him ranked that high to begin with. And I'm actually not going to say it's because Carson Beck's playing bad. It goes back to what I've said all offseason. It's the offense. It's not going to be the same. Todd Monken's gone. They're literally splitting everything down the middle, passing and running the ball, and they're giving it to like 18 running backs. They're carrying the ball 30 times a game. They're passing it 30 times a game. They're not going to play anybody where Carson Beck has to carry the load, so he's not going to do anything. You're going to get 200 yards and like 2 touchdowns from him every week. He's just okay. So, yeah.
Watch what happens when Ladd McConkey is back. Just watch.
He'll throw for 250 and 3 in one game. Yeah.
Just watch.
Just wide receiver.
Yeah.
All right. Make sure you're supporting us on YouTube. The morning shows are about the most fun that we have at any point on the show. And I think that's it. I think that's all we got for tonight. All right. Apologies to Kirk Hurst Street. We ran out of time. We'll get them rescheduled soon. For Austin Nace, Chris Moxley, and Matt Bruning, I'm Felix Sharp. Good night and good luck.